Draper, London History Show. And I kind of like the stuff that she shows, but I also recognize that most of it is just for entertainment purposes. Now, today she decided to get onto a scope that is, well, quite disturbing to me. She wanted to get on the racist pulpit. See, here's the thing. Now, although she does talk about what a piece of shit Lord Horatio was, and he truly was, the fact is that she still does what she can to push history in the wrong direction. What do I mean by that? Do I mean she's changing history? No, that's not possible. You cannot change the event itself, you can only change the narrative about it. If a woman beats her husband to death or stabs him to death for insurance money, and she gets busted and says, oh, well, he was beating me and all this. I wasn't after the insurance money. I just wanted to defend myself. Blah, blah, blah. Well, then why'd you drug him and cut his throat in his sleep? Good question. So this lady with her London History Show, her pulpit for today was, of course, well, it's February. We're all supposed to pretend to give about black people. We're supposed to pretend we care about black people in February, aren't we? Everybody's got this reminder. You guys are like clockwork. I know that in February, a whole bunch of people who don't give two shits about black people are all going to pretend like they care about black people. And of course, we've got the slave trade here in the United States, and we get blamed for that. Americans, right? We get blamed for the French scalping people, and the natives scalping people, and the British scalping people. And then we get told, oh, well, us whites started it. What do you mean, us whites? I never scalped anybody. Now, then let's talk about equality, right? So I'm told by a bunch of black folks that I can't possibly be a victim because I'm white. I'm also told that black people can't be racist. And I'm told that women can't be sexist. Now, the slave trade between Africa and the United States was started by Sir Francis Drake at the request of Queen Elizabeth I of England, who was quite disgusted by black people, by the way. She did not describe them very well. She did not like them. Now, does stating that fact make me a bad person? Am I a horrible person for telling the truth? Am I a slandering monster because I tell the truth? Now, this lady wanted to address a bunch of questions that racist white people have. When racist white people want to ask you these questions, they're always rhetorical. They don't actually want an answer. And if you try to give them an answer, they're going to just interrupt you like Christians do. Arguing with a Christian or a racist, well, it's about as useless a thing as you can do. Not entirely. Here's why the endeavor is not fruitless. At least you tried. Whether they listen or not is not your fault. But these people are harming a lot of people. A lot of people. Now, because you're a white person, you are now expected to stick up for any black person, any person who's not white, matter of fact. You're expected to stick up for them on the internet, but you guys are just going to watch. Just like those of you who want to give me advice, you want to tell me how to think and how to feel. You believe that your lack of morality should become my lack of morality. Well, that ain't gonna happen. I pay close attention to history, including recent history. What the government's gonna do is highly dependent upon what the people want. It doesn't matter what the law wants. The Greeks, same as the Romans, same as modern Americans, same as the British and the Germans and the French in World War One. Bunch of screw ups. They all, every single one of them, understands that they are outweighed by the public. They are outmade by the public, and they have been found wanting by the public. These people are subject to mob law, just as every government is. Any government can be toppled by 1% of the population rising up. Historically, it only takes between 1 and 3% of a population to stage an effective coup. This has been shown in Great Britain in one of their many civil wars. By the way, I went through counting them about 2 weeks ago, how many civil wars Great Britain has had, and they've had at least 11 of them in the last 1,000 years. Of course, you can consider almost any battle on the British Isles to be a civil war. What is it that makes them British? The aristocracy. The same people in charge in Great Britain today, well, the same mentality of people in power today in Great Britain as, of course, Adolf Hitler in World War II and the French in World War I. What happened to Germany in World War I? Was it a decisive military victory that ended the war? No, it wasn't. It was the German people starving to death and rising up against their government. That is what ended World War I. It wasn't the Battle of Somme. It wasn't the SE-5A or the Sopwith Camel. The German people ended World War I. In World War II, they were too cowardly to do so. They were too stocked up with false pride in the form of hatred. The homeless are the new Jews. Whites are the new Jews. Men are the new Jews. The mentally ill are the new Jews. Here in the United States, over 80% of our population has already at least one diagnosis in the DSM-5, which means over 80% of the American population is mentally ill. So if you have to go in alone, 80% of the American population, if they have to turn in a crime alone, are being victimized by lazy police, lazy prosecutors, lazy public pretenders. Meanwhile, this lady in Great Britain, she does want to bring up the American slave trade and how it's different. Well, it's not. Those colonies that had slaves in the United States, were all owned by British citizens. All of them. Every single one of them were owned by British citizens. Because you weren't allowed to have a slave, to own a slave in the United States. Is that true? There was no United States. There wasn't one. Not until the Revolutionary War. The British made slavery illegal in the British Isles in 1066, but slavery continued. In the 1500s, there were still slaves. It's kind of like here in the United States, where you assault and torture your own citizens. Sure, torture is outlawed according to the Geneva Convention, and well, you can pick multiple years for that because they have more than one Geneva Convention. Not that anyone pays any attention. So this lady, as much as I like her, this J lady, I do like her personality. I like the way that she presents history. I like the fact that she wears historical outfits. I like to as well. Not historical military uniforms, but historical period pieces. I like dressing up the way that they dressed up in the 1920s. I do. I like to play dress up. I like to do the intelligent thing. And the intelligent thing is to speak out. Now, according to the BBC programs that I've been watching, the slave trade was started by, well, they omit that part. Wouldn't they? Kind of like when they talk about Lord Horatio Nelson. He's some big folk hero. He was a slave owner and a womanizer. But that's fine. He's famous. He killed a bunch of people and died in the process. Well done, sir. Well done. Queen Elizabeth I, we get to hear about what a wonderful woman she was. No, she was a racist cunt. She sent Sir Francis Drake to go steal a bunch of Africans and drop them off in America. How sick is that? Sir Francis Drake. Y'all tend to knight people who murder people wholesale. Especially if they murder a lot of people wholesale. And especially if they're brown people. Don't get me wrong. I definitely speak out about how brown people are treated worldwide, but I also point out that the British Empire started all of it. Captain Cook got what he deserved. If you guys don't know who Captain Cook is, you might want to look him up and find out what his fate was. Now, as far as might makes right, even with this quote-unquote liberal sissyism that we try to pretend and that the governments try to play, they are still all of the might makes right mentality. Every one of them. When it comes to slavery, we want to focus, and the whole world does this, don't they? They want to focus specifically on slavery in the United States, as if no other slavery ever existed. America is evil because of slavery that was legal until the Civil War. But then again, the 13th Amendment, the amendment that was supposed to free us of slavery, making it illegal for slavery in the South. Instead, it made slavery legal across the entire United States. Except that it's not private ownership anymore. It's government ownership. All they have to do is charge you with a crime and you are guilty. We don't have this constitution that the world wants to tell us about. Oh, sure, it exists on a piece of paper, but that's the only place it exists. It does not exist in our courts. It does not exist in our system of government. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. And yet they don't make any decisions that are good for the American people, or the rest of the citizens of the world for that matter. Now, like I said, I do like this lady's little pop-ups. They're usually only a minute long or less, which is nice. But when she decided to jump on a political bandwagon the way that she did this time, I gotta tell you, I am well and truly disgusted by it. As a victim of slavery in the United States, as a victim of sexual assault in the United States, as a victim of police brutality in the United States, as a victim of, well, the point I was making earlier. You can change the words, it doesn't change the action. Indentured servitude is slavery. Debtor's prison is slavery. Forced labor is slavery. If you change the word torture into pain compliance, the actions are exactly the same. As William Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name would smell like shit. Oh wait, that's not what he said, is it? That's because he wasn't sniffing ass, he was sniffing roses. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Stick that in the end of your cod piece. Tell me that don't make you scream. So, of course, Great Britain, it's not just the situation with slavery that we get thrown in our face, is it? Well, the British wholesale slaughtered Native Americans and forced marched hundreds of thousands of Native Americans to their deaths. The British did this. And it's part of American history because it happened on the North American continent. Well, it's not American history, it's British history. The British allowed that. The British created it. The British pushed it. The British killed Tlingit. The British killed Iroquois. Really, the British killed anybody that they could put a bullet through. Anybody who was brown, they took the property for the crown. And they wanted to retain that empire of brown people. Let's look at who the British owned. All right, they owned a bunch of brown people here in the United States and a bunch of brown people in Africa and their entire country. Entire countries, I should say. And then, of course, we've got the Polynesians and the Malaysians. And, of course, there's the entire Pacific Rim. If there was brown people, the British took them over. And, of course, the French tried to do the same. They did this in Polynesia, in Malaysia, in French Indochina. It didn't used to be French Indochina, did it? Because there used to be no Frenchies over there. Don't get me wrong, the United States is not perfect or pure. I mean, take a look at what we did to the Hawaiians. Take a look at what Admiral Hazard Perry did to the Japanese. Now then, of course, we've got Maori talking about on New Zealand about how the whites lied to them. How whites are not honorable because the whites lied to them. Meanwhile, Maori oral history, Hawaiian oral history, the oral history of Guam, and the oral history of Samoa all show that each of those individual groups did exactly the same things to each other before the British ever showed up, before the French ever showed up, before the Americans ever showed up. You want to blame everything that's ever happened wrong in the world on the United States because of Native Americans? You want to blame it all on the United States because of black people? We didn't do this to them. I never killed an Iroquois. I never killed an Algonquin. I never killed a Samoan. I never killed a Hawaiian. I never killed a black person. Now, I can't say African because you know what? Aborigines are not African. They are considered black people if you see them here in the United States. Why can't they just be considered people? Well, that's part of the divide and conquer issue. We can't do anything about police brutality against white people because we can only focus on police brutality against minorities. We can't do anything about sexual assault against males because, well, they're males and we're to blame for everything. So males like me, who've had to take long-term physical and sexual abuse in our lifetimes, here in America, that's 29 million men. 29 million in the United States were victims of sexual assault before they turned 18. 29 million men told they have to go to the back of the bus. 29 million victims who have to be afraid to speak up. 29 million victims who know that they will be teased, ostracized, bullied, talked down to, talked over, and demasculated if they admit that they were ever victimized by anyone. You pretend that if a man is victimized, that he chose to be victimized. And if women victimize him, then he must have deserved it. If he is gang stalked by a whole group of women and their boyfriends and husbands because one of them is a junkie who couldn't take no for an answer, what are we told? We have to go to the back of the bus. We have rampant sexism everywhere, don't we? I've changed my mind about quite a few things. We should not be fighting for black people's rights in the United States. We shouldn't, and we should not be fighting for women's rights in the United States. We should be fighting for victims' rights. Regardless of color, regardless of gender. Now, this lady with the British show, like I said, I like her. I don't have any issues with her as a human being other than this whole political crap just because it's February. I'm going to tell you something. I stick up for black people year round. I stick up for white people year round. I stick up for women year round. And I stick up for men year round. Do I stick up for all men? Or all women? Or all black people? Or all white people? Absolutely not. I fight for all of our rights by fighting against the narratives that these racist groups hold so dear. Racist groups like BLM, racist groups like the KKK. There is no difference between the two. None. As a survivor of police misconduct repeatedly, I've spent 6 years trying to get help turning in my predators, and 6 years being abused over it because I'm white, because I'm a male, because I have no money. The fact is, if the American people weren't such overwhelming cowards, they would have done something about this a long time ago. All those people who voted for Abraham Lincoln, they all knew that what they were voting for was an end to slavery. And even the South voted for Abraham Lincoln. How amazing is that? Multiple states who had expected and taken advantage of the leisure of being a part of the United States decided that because they didn't get what they wanted. And what was it that they wanted? Is it states' rights? No. It was only one right. The right to own another human being. And those 600,000 Northern soldiers who died in the Civil War threw away their lives for absolutely nothing when the 13th Amendment was passed. Then anybody who's too broke for a real lawyer can be used as slave labor in the United States. We modeled our system after Nazi Germany. We just put a capitalist twist on it. Nazi Germany modeled their crap after the United States chain gangs. Kind of reminds me of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars. I will make it legal. So this lady with her London history thing, it's cool and all, but if you're gonna get political with it, understand that I don't give a fuck about the politics, I give a fuck about the people. I don't give a fuck about the law, I care about my loved ones. And if the law prevents me from protecting them, then the law does not apply. I have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't have liberty. I don't have a life. And as far as pursuing happiness, I was happy. You took that all away from me. You wanted to pretend that because I'm not black, that I can't be a victim. Because I'm not rich, that I can't be a victim. Because I'm not a woman, I can't be a victim. This is never okay. There's only one nation on the planet that I find more revolting than the United States that I live in, and that would be Great Britain, for starting all of these horrible atrocities and then wanting to point fingers at Americans like it's our fault that the British murdered people in North America, murdered people in South America, murdered people in Africa, murdered people in Asia, murdered people in the Pacific. The thing is, the British owned human beings. And that's all they ever cared about. Kaiser Wilhelm II, he didn't give a shit about the German people, and they kicked him out of the country. All he cared about was might makes right, same as the United States today and Russia today. Same as the police. What's a better country to live in, the United States or Britain? It's a tough question, isn't it? Let's weigh the pros and cons. Both countries are absolutely abhorrent. When it comes to abuse, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to assault, when it comes to child molesting, your color, your gender, your money, they don't make a goddamn difference to me. You know, most of my predators have been to jail or prison for child abuse. Why is it that I've been charged with child abuse? Why is it that I've never been charged with rape? Why is it that I've never been charged as a sexual predator of any kind? Or a predator of children? Meanwhile, we get to see how many of the female predators that I tried to turn in either got leniency or extreme leniency. Sarah Nelson got a slap on the wrist for sexual assault. As the assistant warden that I had to try to turn the assaults against me to. Well, one of them anyway. Your history does not cover modern events. Your history does not pay attention to the way that it is now. You can tell me that it's because of something that happened in 1066 or in 1588. But the fact is, your decisions today are your decisions today. They're not the decisions of Philip II. They're not the decisions of John the Baptist. They're not the decisions of Jesus Christ. Those are your decisions. When I threatened people back, that was my decision. Of course, what other options did I have? You guys ever stop to think about that? What options do the victims really have? If they're poor, might as well be guilty. But if you got a friend or family that cares, they'll help you turn it in. A real friend or family member. I've never had those. Instead, I've got fucking retards that want to argue with me. You don't like the fact that I said retard. I get it. I've been called a retard my whole life for being different. Meanwhile, I'm smarter than nearly everyone I've ever met. The problem with being an intelligent person is that just stupid people, you seem crazy. Try explaining nuclear physics to an idiot. Good luck. Now try explaining nuclear physics to somebody who thinks they know what the fuck they're talking about. You know what's even worse than that? Because if somebody thinks they know what they're talking about, and they're not a nuclear engineer, they're just an idiot. And you're a nuclear engineer, and this idiot wants to argue with you as if he's right. One of two things are happening. Either one, he's delusional as fuck, or number two, he is dumb enough to believe that telling outlandish stories like that are going to get him liked. And like my sister's friend Ed, wanting to claim that he could have his cousin send military drones over my sister's house. No, you can't. With my sister, she couldn't bother to help me because she was too busy getting twacked out of her goddamn gourd and at her tweaker cam. Ran Ingersoll, charged with child abuse, had her kids taken away. Then there's Amy Witcher, charged with child abuse, had her kids taken away. Then there's Amy Spencer, aka Amy Kalina Kingery, charged with child abuse and had her kids taken away. There's a reason for this. Ted Bollinger, charged with child abuse, had his kids taken away. The predators I tell on are actual predators, and I make sure I verify those words with multiple sources. Something that I do to this day, but do any of you bother to take a look? No. When it comes to the British people, they could do something. They could do something to stop it. They didn't, though, did they? Who put a stop to British imperialism? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The French would have gone along with it too if they hadn't already capitulated. A lot of y'all, you say, don't live in the past. Well, we need to understand our past. If, for example, I broke my pinky toe on my right foot yesterday. Well, yeah, yesterday, because it's 1:51 in the morning. I broke my foot. Broke my pinky toe. That was yesterday. There are still consequences for it. My toe is still broken. Time will heal it. Sure it will, if I'm allowed. If I don't have to continue walking places and going places and running around like a chicken with my head cut off. With not having my finances, with having police officers that I was trying to turn in allowed to prevent me from turning them in by pressing false charges against me. By pressing false charges against me, they were able to have me incarcerated. No judge, no jury. All they had to do was lie. The judge would just write it down. Oh, all right. Well, you said so, so it must be true. And this is how it is for poor people in the United States. But nobody cares. All these poor people in the United States, every poor person I know here deserves to be poor because they're cowards. They're poor because they're selfish. They're poor because they only think about themselves. When it happens to somebody else, they want to look the other way. Especially those of you who have support. Those of you who have people that you can go to if there's a problem and they will help you out, you guys are the worst pieces of shit of all of them. Because you have it in your nasty, sick, pampered little heads that everybody gets the same shit that you do, that everybody got the mommy and daddy that you got, that everybody got a co-signer for their first apartment or their first vehicle. No, 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 son. That ain't the way it works. Some of us actually had to bust our asses for a used piece of shit. The thing is that I've seen what happens when poor people work together. There's always one person who gets desperate and greedy and fucks it up for everybody. Destroys all of the work that everybody else put in. Am I more disgusted with Great Britain than the United States right now? Yeah, actually I am. They still talk on their channels like they're still some great nation. They never were. Great Britain has always been a nation of savages running around murdering other people and using the excuse that the other people are savages. Then again, the Maori want to talk about how dishonest the British were, and the French were, and the Americans were. Meanwhile, all of Maori history is full of exactly the same thing. What the hell is going on with my computer? Alright, I'm just gonna have to remove Discord. It's been on my computer for forever. It's always on my startup. It says Discord updater not responding. I don't need it to respond. I need it to close down. I guess that is a response. The thing is, here in the United States, we take things out on whoever's the easiest to take it out on. That's males. Who are the police most likely to murder in the United States? Well, 96% of their victims are males. 49% of their victims are homeless. Only 22% of their victims are black. Why is that significant? Only 22%. Well, because black people in the United States have a population size of about 60 million. And for the homeless, at the time that was done, 2019, black people had a population size of 60 million people. The homeless only had a population size of 500,000. Yet they account for over double those murdered by the police. Our entire lives are victimization. Sometimes you're a pretty girl or a pretty boy, and you get free drugs and free sex. Those are the idiots who make it bad for all of us. The entitled. Because you're good looking, you're entitled to a good looking and rich husband, right? Because you're good looking and rich, you are entitled to purchase yourself a pretty wife, and there are plenty of women in America willing to sell themselves to you. You're a millionaire? There is somebody who will marry you because you're a millionaire. Yeah. And how scary is that? Like I said, I like that lady and her little channel. but I'm not okay with the politics. The United and Native Americans are not to blame for the whole world. We are not to blame for the British or their savagery. We are not to blame for the Maori or their savagery. We are not to blame for any of the savagery of anyone but ourselves. Keep that in mind next time you want to blame all of us. You want to blame men, even the men who have been sexually abused repeatedly. You want to blame men for sexual abuse. You want to let women off with a slap on the wrist. If you can find a way to blame it on a man, then that's fine, isn't it? When Harley Richmond got busted drinking and driving with 5 children in the car, sure, she was charged, but they dropped the charges. Instead, they charged Dallas Richmond with assault against Harley because he kicked her out of the house. Screw the United States and screw all of your political agendas. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and when you decide that you're going to partition it based on gender, looks, money, skin color, you're a disgusting excuse for a human being, and I would appreciate it if you would quit wasting our oxygen.